I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Gary Webb. I am an investigative journalist, and in 1996, I wrote a series of stories entitled Dark Alliance, which was about CIA involvement in drug trafficking.
I knew a man who once said death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back.
We've opened Skull and Bones, the secret society. It's so secret we can't talk about it. What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go on.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the rest.
Number 322.
I have duty to report this afternoon that my friend and colleague, Tim Russert, collapsed and died early this afternoon.
I may die in this cell tonight or in the arena tomorrow. I am a slave. What possible difference can I make?
And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Hello, and welcome back, RE Deadheads, to your favorite live weekly call-in conspiracy show. Here again to get your weekly dose of Schizo Bros. As always, Austin Wade Picard to the right, and myself, Jose Galison, to the left here. Digging into the latest in this week's weirdness. This is no exception, another weird week. The Clancy craziness seems to have taken over this week. I've still refused to become informed on this case because I just don't really fucking care. It's just more fun seeing women and Matt Walsh squabbling in a corner. That's just been the fun of it. And then just hearing fun little tidbits from my wife about, like, did you know, like, that maybe she didn't do it and this and that. And although she doesn't take it too seriously and is like lobbying for, being able to murder children or whatever. It's more just a fun little conspiracy thing. But yeah, Wade, how you been? Or Wade, Austin, how you been this week? Yeah.
All is well, brother. Honestly, it's been so hot in the area, right? I don't know if you guys have had any sort of like heat wave, but my God, it's been like, I'm honestly ready for the summer to come to an end. I'll put it that way. But yeah, we always get like, I don't know, probably 3 weeks out of the 2 solid months of summer, in terms of in Los Angeles that are like unbearable a little bit. But still beyond that, I mean, honestly, I'm just seeing basically helter-skelter race war propaganda and this strange kind of escalation of the culture war through the lens of the gender paradigm, right? Just kind of pitting the duality against each other and what seems to be a little bit of what we were referencing last week, right? That TikTok short digital almost kind of avenue of mind control, opportunistic window that could very well be controlling the subconscious minds of, I don't know, maybe the vast majority of the general public in terms of how they are engaging in their social media. And I think just
also the Candacification of it all too, like the
absolutely,
yeah, because like you look at, like, I get what you're meaning too from the TikTokification. It's kind of the like dumbing down of the brains, but kind of coming from both ends of it. Like it's almost like you have the higher level, like almost sophisticate, like, oh, like, right. You get to be a little more sophisticated with it. You're more like the Candace version as opposed to the TikTok. Because this is a little bit more. There's this is a whole conspiracy that goes along with it, as opposed to just some fleeting pee pee poo poo whatever TikTok thing. But even still, it does not have this sort of longevity or sort of backing of being moored by any sort of like rigorous intellectual understanding. That it is just kind of, but whatever. If it's just for funsies, if it's just tabloids, it's whatever. Seems to be some people are kind of, and I guess for this story, I don't know what your takeaway. I've kind of just felt it's kind of just been gay. Like it's been kind of blown out of proportion, but. There maybe there is something to. I'm interested if you think. I mean, obviously it is. The powers that be blowing this up, but it is just kind of let women be silly and have their fun. I guess. Like I don't know. Of course, yes, women are always evading responsibility. Like what new piece of information are we putting out in the world? Like I don't know. It's just like it's just kind of. It's I don't know. It's a from what I've seen, it's a conspiracy thing. It's kind of dumb. Now I will say it is a little bit gross because it's a real thing, and it is like you're just kind of getting this like fun sort of vampiric loosh sucking thing off of it, and you're kind of honestly in a weird way making it, making everything worse. But like to the Candacification as well. It's kind of that same thing. But well, I mean, I don't know.
Very much kind of and through that very same lens of Candace Owens and this sort of TikTok empowerment of it's sort of empowered the online digital investigative sleuth, but the sleuth that has no real concept of how to kind of objectively pursue the truth and also, I don't know, follow through for the right reasons in terms of the investigation in the first place. And for me, it kind of hinges so much on this glorification of Hollywood. And you see how the true crime community has affected so many women, and this is in no way like any sort of like targeted attack. I just think that I've seen firsthand, just, personally, so many and just the kind of strange data sets as well, as far as like the amount of women who are attracted to the true crime narrative, the true crime podcast, any sort of kind of media that will at the very least scratch that itch, right? And I think there's something strange to how this has permeated into the real world in terms of many of these cases, whether that is documentaries that are ran on Netflix and HBO and Amazon Prime or whatever the case may be, that kind of like the type, right? That spends their evenings consuming hours upon hours of documentaries with no real outlet or even consideration as to why they're even pursuing this in any real way, which is kind of strange in the first place. But so it kind of leads people into what is already this very much, I think, cultural, just in terms of it's very what's the term where it's polarizing, right? And as far as just the topic and subject matter specifically, in terms of not only the Shutter Island concept of like a mother legitimately murdering and commit, her own children, especially at such a young age, right? It's like absolutely impossible to comprehend. It's unbelievable at a certain level.
Real quick, I do want to hedge something, I guess, with my commentary. There is like the seemingly two classes of people I've seen defending the Clancy broad or whatever, and it is people who have this like, I don't think she did it, and whatever. Okay, they may think she didn't do it. But then there's these other people that is just spinning this sympathetic yarn about her condition. And like, don't get me wrong, I totally get it. That's really hard. Your hormones are on flux. Things are rough. Yes, exactly. So that I have, that right there, I find it disgusting. I have very little sympathy. I guess there is some angle of sympathy in the sense of like, hey, this is a real problem, yada, yada, yada. But if you're getting in some sort of realm of really giving... I don't know. It is like to some like, bitch, you killed some kids. Like, I don't know. But like, if they do genuinely believe she didn't do it and they have some reason for it, whatever, I'll hear it out. But now it's obviously a distinct thing when they're doing this, like, oh no, like she was dealing with this issue. And even then these like blaming of the husband, you'll hear them being like, oh, well, why did he leave the house and this and that? And you're like, cause like, I don't know. We can't just like attach you to our hip. But I
will be honest, it's strange that he came out making a statement just after, essentially, it's like just after the deaths of the children. The husband, I think his name is Patrick, he came out with a public statement, and he basically, it was in support for his wife at the time, right? And just for anyone who's unaware, I guess we should at least kind of like outline the bare bones of this case in the first place, which is the Clancy family killings is essentially what it is. And it's the unfortunately, you have 3 young children who were effectively murdered and strangled by their mother, right? Lindsay Clancy, I believe is her name.
Workout bands, I believe is what it was.
Yeah, with workout bands, yes. And this is, I believe now they claim it's a severe case of postpartum mental health trauma or crisis that she had endured. But the problem is the level of pharmaceuticals that were being overprescribed to her, I believe as well, definitely factor into this case and should be at the very least considered in terms of vetting and investigating and understanding and getting some sort of like ground to stand on in terms of a foundation of knowledge, just basic knowledge as far as this case is concerned. Now, I will say it's important to understand how this can be culturally weaponized, right? And that is always going to be the case, where you have political movements or individuals who are acting in bad faith, who want to weaponize these concepts. Usually, it's very much in a way in which it's being misrepresented as well in the first place, and so that's something you always have to watch for. And I think that you know, for anyone to attempt to morally justify, right, what effectively ultimately transpired in terms of this case, I mean, you're out of your element. What on earth are you even attempting to do, right? In terms of that, I think is morally just absurd. But again, I think it's also interesting that you have kind of disgusting outcomes and just aftermath in terms of after this case really was given the spotlight in the recent days, right? Not very long ago. Basically, you have it going much more public than originally was because of this major TikTok conspiracy as well, which is effectively what I think almost went viral, right, in the real sense. And I thought it was interesting because, and again, this all transpired, I believe this all happened in 2023 in January. And so you have, I believe it was the young children, like if you look at a picture of them as well, it's like, it does kind of, it's important to at least get a visual, you know, of what exactly we're discussing in the first place. But yeah, she allegedly attempted to commit suicide as well, but there was a lot of debate over the injuries that were sustained and how barely any blood was even drawn in the first place. But again, they claim that was because of the elements, because again, it was January and this was basically this was in Massachusetts, I believe. So you have, I believe snow was on the ground at this time. And so it's important for people to you know, consider all of the different factors involved. But there's much more in regard to what I think is an overprescription of pharmaceuticals to this woman and antidepressants as well. And there's a specific psychiatrist that seems almost upset when she's hospitalized at a certain point, whenever throughout the process of her being hospitalized, they effectively claim that she's been overprescribed, right? These like just if I remember correctly, it was Seroquel, I believe it was, that was prescribed, and it was an antipsychotic at the time. But I believe when she was actually hospitalized and went to the emergency room and then was inevitably hospitalized, it was in December, and this is just leading up to the murders. And she basically admitted herself into a day program after she was brought to the emergency room, right? And this all happened at like a general hospital originally in Massachusetts, and then she's basically admitted to this postpartum depression facility at a day program, right, in a women and infants hospital in Rhode Island. And so this is when the hospital decides that they're going to give her essentially her own kind of recommendations, other than her psychiatrists and doctors that she had been effectively relying upon. And I thought, really, it's important for people to understand that, she had very much been going through what she claimed to have been, was calling hotlines and things of that nature, right? And there were all these allegations that she wasn't suicidal, but yet she was calling suicidal hotlines, and it was very strange. And she was prescribed at one point Prozac. She was prescribed Ambien, Remeron, Klonopin, and I believe the Remeron she claimed led to her basically having these hallucinations, and that she had these horribly intrusive thoughts, and about wanting it to all be over, right? Essentially, is what she claimed.
And this top tier dissociating, dude.
Yeah,
like that's what all these. I mean, at a basic level, most of these, SSRIs and this and that, they're mostly just to some way, shape, or form, generally just dissociating you to where you're like, chill, to where you're able to chill out, to where you're able to, not feel anything, whatever. Right. So yeah, I mean,
she had. So basically, leading up to the children's deaths, she was prescribed talk therapy originally, and Zoloft, right, initially. And this is all after she's experiencing postpartum depression, anxiety, and it's after the births of the first two children. And so then she has basically after her second child, she is taking Zoloft, and she's going to therapy, right, with just basically talk therapy, speech therapy, or not speech therapy, but you get it, right? Emotional talk therapy is what they call it. So she had her symptoms like escalate and become worse after the third child was born. And then essentially she claimed it all escalated very much toward the end of her maternity leave, right? And so you see how there's a lot of different kind of debate throughout the testimony as well, that on the record and things of that nature. But she allegedly was going to resume taking the Zoloft to help with the anxiety, to returning to work and things of that nature. But then she had a psychiatrist that she began to see, which her name was Jennifer Tufts, I believe was her name. And this is when she's diagnosed with just an anxiety disorder, and she is re-prescribed Zoloft, and she continues to seek therapy. And basically, you have Clancy attempting to. She reported like lack of sleep, basically sleeplessness is what she reported, and so she was experiencing insomnia, and I think this is a clear side effect of Zoloft, and this happens very often, I think, in people who and also she was prescribed Ativan as like a reaction to this. And so I just think, once again,
it's that dissociation and overdrive. Yeah.
Yes, you're escalating the problem. You're not in any way, and this is the issue with overprescription, just overprescribing, especially I think you're dancing with the devil in terms of antidepressants in the first place, but specifically benzodiazepine, I do think is very much utilized in terms of creating this impulse control inability to, as we've discussed in the past, right? It's something that I think should be understood, is that it definitely has an effect and a negative impact on your impulse control. And also it's a strange emotional state of mind that you essentially embrace when you're under the influence of benzos as well. And so, but either way, you already see at the beginning of her postpartum depression and her issues with maternity leave, she's already being overprescribed, which, say what you want, but I think if you're seeking a pharmaceutical solution to a psychological problem, obviously I can't speak in blanket statement terms here, but I will say more often than not, this is a psychological weakness on your own part. And I think something that should be internalized and understood and acknowledged and rooted out in a much more effective way, and far less relying upon what has become this unfortunate weakness and crutch in modern culture and modern civilization, which is this overprescription of pharmaceutical agents, which will only inevitably lead to further and further escalating issues, whether they be psychological or physical. They will only, effectively negatively impact you in the future. And so, in what way are you actually kind of understanding and I think just fundamentally grappling with reality as an adult, in honest and objective terms? It's like that's not really the utmost importance or priority to the average person. I think they much more would just prefer a quick and easy band-aid, make this go away for the temporary moment, and at least tell me that there's a solution and send me on my way. And unfortunately, this level of just blind faith in the medical institutions is another unfortunate outcome that of modern society that you can very much kind of realize through your own personal experience. I just from frame of reference with my own personal family members, like who have just listened to their doctor's opinion and advice and followed that path to their early grave. Like what on earth did you accomplish, other than effectively destroying your own well-being?
People have this weird, retarded view when it comes to doctors, I think, and it's so pervasive. And I there's so many people, and it's just this thing it just drives me nuts, where they just this like deferment to authority. When it's like, if you are a doctor, then it's like, well, they're the doctor, and you're like, okay, but a doctor in what? A doctor, and even then you're like, okay, what are the incentives here? What is their job? What are they being paid for? They are literally like, if you're a psychiatrist, like your job, you're probably mostly making money off of shucking pills. So exactly. It's like, this is kind of, I mean, sure, you're like, cool, they went to school for a lot of time, but all that is, a lot of times, may just be reinforcing negative beliefs to begin with. So congrats, you've just created a more elaborate way to reinforce a possibly negative thing. Like, that's really all you've done here by saying they're a doctor.
Exactly.
But
the craziest thing too, right, is that you have, so Lindsay decides, her name's Lindsay Clancy, right? And so she basically decides to self-medicate because she's dealing with this insomnia. And so
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but this is a little bit more serious to just read. This is a frequent commenter we see in the chat, Ivy Jane 6203. She said, well, 12 days after my best friend was put on Zoloft, she hung herself from a tree in her front yard. I'm very sorry to hear that, but that is another anecdotal example of exactly what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's impulse control and emotional overreaction, and a desensitized, to this level of becoming desensitized to where you're having this almost out of body experience and these horribly intrusive thoughts, which she personally describes. And again, I believe this is far more to do with pharmaceutical impact on now. To what degree are people around her essentially facilitating this? I don't know. That's a difficult thing to, and I think it is important to essentially look into the personal life of the husband a little bit more at a deeper level to maybe gauge and an understanding of because again, you do have a role to play in terms of being a partner to your spouse, and I think at the very least a father to your children as well. And I think that, how are you not seeing warning signs? Like, I would just have to imagine you would be seeing glaring warning signs at this point. Now, who knows? Maybe these pharmaceutical, now clearly with her path, Lindsay specifically, you do have these outward and overt and obvious examples of this is a major red flag. Something should have been done. I cannot believe no one stepped in on her behalf in the first place, because you could only imagine that she would inevitably hurt herself or someone else, in the inevitable future is what it seems like, if you're to believe the somewhat official narrative out of the court documents and the testimony given in court and things of that nature. And so again, we're trying to kind of gain a more well-rounded perspective on this. But she was warned at a certain point. Here's the problem. Is that, so she's given Ativan, right? And she claimed that it reduced her anxiety, but not her sleeplessness. She still had this insomnia that she couldn't shake. And so she began to self-medicate with Benadryl as a sleep aid. That's not a good idea. right? You're already taking Zoloft. You're now prescribed Ativan, right? You essentially have this anxiety disorder, which join the fucking club, right? Who in modern society isn't grappling with anxiety on a daily basis? It's nothing new.
Deal with your shit. You're not special. Like I don't know. It is all this like crutch shit of like, hey, I have this problem. You're like, okay, yeah. So we all do. We keep pushing forward. I mean, it is hard. Everyone's individual, and a lot of the stuff we're talking about, there's trauma cycles, or hell, I even believe there's like generational trauma cycles, because I mean, by how you're being raised. So, I mean, obviously be kind with everybody, but to some extent, we're all dealing with our own shit. And and to some degree, yes, sometimes people use substances as a crutch, and sometimes crutches may be appropriate at a given time. A crutch is something you will use at times. So, but if you find yourself leaning too much on the crutch, you're going to end up finding you're going to, when you don't really need it, you're going to end up walking weird. It's going to cause more problems. At a certain point, you end up causing more problems than anything. I'd say, generally speaking, most of these things, even as a crutch, should probably not be used. But the crutch is a good example, because usually a crutch is like when you broke your fucking leg or something crazy. So, like, if you just got raped, or your mom died, or your wife murdered your 3 children or something like that. I don't know. Maybe there's a case for a temporary fucking Ativan or whatever the fuck treatment. But I mean, for years upon years upon years upon years, like, what the fuck are we doing here?
Yeah, and so the husband testifies, basically goes on the record that her condition escalated, right, and that was toward the end of 2022. So it's just before the murders took place in January. Around November to December, she really was showing these overt signs and allegedly. So he claims that she basically was withdrawing entirely from, like, socially, and just in terms of socially, and was going through these bouts of like extreme fear and terror, and she was also had no appetite whatsoever, right? Which I would imagine was somewhat induced by the level of pharmaceuticals that she was taking, potentially. But either way, she even posted on social media about, it was some sort of group that she was a member of, right? Like a Facebook membership group of some kind that had to do with postpartum depression. And so anyway, basically she was claiming that the Ativan had helped her feel normal, but she was concerned about the addiction level, right? And was basically seeking alternatives at the time. And so she had gone to, by November 15th, right? She went to the emergency room. And this is after going over 2 days without sleep. And so this obviously would cause anyone to begin to question reality, I would think, right? And
it doesn't take a whole lot of sleeplessness before you start doing weird shit like hallucinating and stuff.
Absolutely.
That stuff will fuck with you. I mean, the Zizians, for those who recall that, like, one of the things they were doing to train themselves when there's these weird trans terror groups, this weird Silicon Valley forward thinking tech stuff, one of the things they were doing is they would try to, essentially they're trying to, their whole theory was like having 2 brains and having 2 sides. And like they would try to like close their eyes and like have one side be awake and one side sleep. And then they would kind of like go back and forth kind of deal, do periods with one. Yeah, the idea
in the brain, like the left hemisphere of the brain and the right hemisphere of the brain.
That was their idea. Yeah. Now maybe it's hard to know whether that actually really did, create any sort of schism as a function of actually like because they're separate. Although either way, you end up with the same result, because either way, you're maybe you are actually successfully creating some sort of neurological divergence, but also or you're fucking up your sleep to where you're going to end up with these same exact symptoms that I was kind of alluding to here, to where you're losing your fucking mind because you're depriving yourself of sleep.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and that's why I think when you see this pattern kind of just taking place and really it just
real quick, phone lines are open, 1-833-72-DEAD, 1-833-722-3323. Go ahead, bud.
Yeah, and I have gone quite some time without sleep as well. And I used to work night audit shifts back in the day at hotels and like roll over the books overnight. And so I worked overnight shifts like for quite some time. And I liked it, you know, until around, I think you get over 6 months in and you start to feel like you're no longer a member of the general public, of just society in general. Like, it's very strange. You feel like a vampire, you know. Your scheduling is, and your daily life is just entirely inverted from the normal person. And so it does become like this monotonous, you know. I kind of think it's more something that feels unsustainable. You know, if you're somewhat of a normal person.
Personally, I liked off shifts. That's just me. But,
I did too. But also,
but it's not great for family life. I will say that. But
it takes the toll. And like, I was doing it full time too, so I think that was like just as far, and working like multiple places at that point. And so it was like trying to kind of manage that. It's just, you do start to become kind of, it's an out of body experience in a way, but at the same time, it's like, clearly lack of sleep affects you psychologically more than you would ever imagine. And you do some, just, it's almost like you're in this, you're in a daze. You're in this kind of like potential. But anyway, the point being is that you see this strange path playing out in terms of the effects that not only, I believe the pharmaceutical agents and the unfortunate kind of self-medication that she's attempting to engage in as well. And this is only what we're aware of, right? So keep that in mind as well. And I think there's something to the fact that of like EMF effectively disrupting your sleep patterns and keeping you from achieving REM sleep and things of that nature. And so it's like, there's so much more we need to insulate ourselves from in terms of just environmental impact in a negative and damaging way that is important. But obviously that doesn't really factor in here that we're aware of. But the important aspects of her personal kind of evolution in this case was that at a certain point, she's basically, I believe, even she's prescribed trazodone at one point, right? And she claimed it was ineffective, but this is after she sought treatment for the lack of sleep for over 2 days and went to an emergency room. And so the physician that was on staff at the time prescribed her trazodone. And basically, trazodone is an antidepressant medication that's used to essentially treat major anxiety disorders and major depressive disorders and things of that nature, but also insomnia. So it's not just anxiety and depression, but insomnia as well. And it basically affects your serotonin, levels, and there are reuptake inhibitors. It's a SSRI, but it's like a SARI or something. It's like something different, but it's still very much the same, right? So anyway, once again, it's just like this isn't the path to success in terms of being a good mother. At the very least, entering motherhood, you wouldn't imagine you would do this on every pharmaceutical agent known to man that your doctor is willing to prescribe in the current moment for anxiety and depression. Sorry to tell you, it's like, and this will only end in a bad way, whether it turns you into one of the worst mothers on earth, or whether it basically causes you to commit homicide and kill your 3 infant children. I don't know. It's like obviously there's a major gap between those two outcomes, but at the same point, I mean, actually they're both equal. But the point is that you have the mother-in-law even going on the record, right? This is by November. You have the mother-in-law. This is when the escalation is happening and the evolution of her kind of emotional state. Her mother-in-law, I believe, was a nurse, right? And basically contacted another psychiatric nurse. And this was, I believe, at one of her prenatal clinics that she had worked at or something, right? The mother-in-law. So, and this is probably why you have so many people on the TikTok viral conspiracy in regard to this case, and what seemed to be like, the and again, who knows that, and ultimately what took place here. But I personally believe that this will only, as far as this level of pharmaceuticals that she is obviously unfortunately been prescribed during this time, it will only lead her to basically having this level of becoming emotionally numb, right? And that is what she even personally claims herself. And so you basically see that she's prescribed Prozac throughout this process after her mother-in-law introduced her to another psychiatric nurse, a nurse practitioner at this clinic. And so she prescribes her Prozac. Now, by like a few days later, it's still November of 2022, just before the murders takes place in January the following year, basically, she is not only prescribed the recent Prozac, but she's also basically prescribed Ambien, Remeron, and Klonopin, right? Which this is when we really see a turn for the worse, and also where Patrick, her husband, I believe, went on the record in testimony claiming that you saw her condition escalate during this exact same time frame. And so she essentially is prescribed this Prozac, Ambien, Remeron, and Klonopin, and is basically transferred at that point. Her case specifically is transferred to this new nurse practitioner. And now I just wonder like how much of this has to do, because this is when she's prescribed, whenever the new nurse practitioner is given her case and it's transferred to her in December of 2022. Basically, this is when she's prescribed Seroquel, which is an antipsychotic, right? And that is by almost December. It's still late November. And so again, I think you have Lindsay Clancy going on the record telling both of these psychiatrists that she was seeking advice from, and also being prescribed pharmaceuticals from, that she believed the Remeron was causing her these major intrusive thoughts. And so this is in messages to one of her psychiatrists. She claims, and she described them as, quote, horribly intrusive thoughts, wanting it to be all over, as I said earlier, right? And feeling, quote, concerningly numb right now, like I have no emotion whatsoever. That's what she said. So she is entering the mindset of a psychopath, of a complete and total psychopath. I mean, honestly, if you have no connection to emotion whatsoever at this point, well, then how can we step back from this and act as if now the only way I could imagine kind of spousal, and again, I'm unaware of the level of guilt that we could potentially apply to the husband or any of the family members, and I'm not at all saying that they're to blame for the ultimate result, but my God, when you can and firsthand basically witness your spouse entering this dissociative state of mind, right? And I mean, I would be freaking out. Like
at some point, I get that we're like, dude, the dissociation's occurring here, and to some degree, it's like, is this postpartum? Is she responsible? But I mean, a lot of this, with it being pharmaceutical related, as you're kind of very much getting at here, this is 100% of their own doing, and it's like it doesn't take a whole lot of. I mean, I don't know. This is. I mean, I remember when my kids were little, I've not that I don't really drink at all, these days, like at hardly at all. But I made a point when my kids were little, because I was younger, when I had my my youngest, I was like in my early 20s, like, so like, hey, whatever, I was still in my 20s, like to have a few beers here and there, and like during that time you just don't, because it's like, hell, even like drinking 2 beers on a night that, like, if I had my couple-month old, for one, it's going to impede my sleep. 2, it's going to make it so I'm less likely to hear her in the middle of the night to get up and help with her. So yeah, it is like, these are like, I get we're like slipping into these other dimensions with dissociation or whatever, but it's like you are the one to some degree that has agency of getting yourself to there. It's like, yes, you are to some degree going into some place where it's maybe not entirely you in some abstract way doing it, but you are the one guiding yourself to that place. So, right. I mean, she killed her kids is what it looks like. I mean, I haven't looked enough into details of all this. But it looks pretty damn clear to me this broad killed her kids, unfortunately. Right. So
it is, and honestly, whenever you see, like, she basically reaches out to her psychiatrist, and she expresses that this, as I mentioned, right, her level of basically entering this psychotic state of mind and having this inability to even have any emotion whatsoever, and feeling concerningly numb. She then, it's strange because her psychiatrist basically goes on the record in court testifying that she believed Clancy had no suicidal ideation whatsoever at this time, but was close to it technically and feeling very hopeless. And so that's essentially the level of kind of like I think the opportunistic wiggle room you have as a professional psychiatrist to insulate yourself from any real accountability whatsoever. I mean, you would clearly imagine that happens so very often, anytime. And you would have to think these strange psychiatrists, with their distorted relationship with pharmaceuticals in the first place, due to their overwhelming level of writing prescriptions on a daily basis, right? It's kind of like desensitized them. And I would imagine many of them would be of the mind, think how many times I've written a prescription of this kind out, and obviously nothing came of it whatsoever. And there was no sort of major tragic, outcome. But anyway, I think that you have the fact that the psychiatrists are going on the record claiming that she during this time, even though she gave those statements that very clearly seem to, at the very least, they're extraordinary red flags to me, claiming that she had no suicidal ideation. Well, okay, I guess you can make that statement, but this is around the exact same time that Lindsay Clancy begins to report hallucinations. And she contacted, I believe it was 2 separate suicide hotlines. And neither of the suicide hotlines intervened because they basically claimed that she didn't have a plan to harm herself or commit suicide at the time. And so there was no intervention whatsoever. Now, I don't know what the normal protocol or is in terms of whenever you reach out to a suicide hotline. But you would think, right, if at this point, maybe someone would reach out and attempt to make contact with this person. Not entirely sure, but this is when I think bipolar disorder was mentioned by one of the psychiatrists. And so you begin to realize, because I believe she went to the emergency room, and then she declined inpatient treatment at the time, but then she admitted herself to this voluntary postpartum depression day program that I had mentioned to you earlier. And this is when basically she was discharged. And I thought this was one of the biggest smoking guns throughout the entire case, just as far as the reason potentially behind her psychological problems at the time. Now, the hospital discharges her very quickly, and this was the Women and Infants Hospital of Rhode Island, I believe. And basically, they claimed, and this is what they said on the record, that they believed her issues were more likely related to overmedication and misdiagnosis than postpartum depression. Boom. And I just thought, oh my God, like, this is what, the fact that, I don't even think that really is hard to understand, right? It seems far more just, likely in my mind than any sort of conspiracy in terms of the husband being behind, right? Like this kind of TikTok viral conspiracy, that he potentially became the sort of voice of God that talked her into committing these murders. Now, I will admit that she has a fascinating statement that she made about essentially during the murder, what she experienced, or during the murders, right? What she effectively experienced. And that is very, very strange. But there's also, there's a couple of other prescriptions that she's given, by the way, just so people are aware. There are kind of like major depressive disorder, severe without psychotic features, like these strange diagnoses, diagnoses that were being given that I think were not at all sort of like acting with all of the information required to even make the diagnosis. It's kind of a strange thing, but I think that happens very often. And but either way, it seems like she was significantly suffering from lack of sleep still at this time, for quite some time. And anyway, it feels like the family should have been far more involved. To what extent they were, obviously it seems like they very much were. The mother-in-law herself was trying to connect her with psychiatrists who legitimately were giving her prescriptions, but that was just before she had this psychotic break and basically was institutionalized for a brief moment. Now, the way in which the murders took place are fascinating, right? Because again, it's like it's disgusting to even imagine, unfortunately. But I do think that knowing that she claimed that originally, basically she claims on the record that she woke up with suicidal thoughts, right? And that she heard a male voice that was directing her to commit the acts, right? And this is basically on January 24th, right, of 2023. She, Lindsay, and this is according to the husband on the record in trial, right? Lindsay Clancy tells her husband, Patrick, yeah, she does slit her wrists and jump out the window for sure. But it's very strange as well, because there's even allegations that the wounds weren't very deep whatsoever, and she wasn't even bleeding, and it was much more of like a. Yeah.
I mean, anyone saying that though, it's like, well, yeah. I mean, people think like I'm gonna kill myself, cut my wrist, cut my throat, and then just the natural human reaction of like cutting, like you don't end up. It totally would make sense if you're trying to kill yourself, and especially she just killed her 3 kids. She's probably a little bit out of sorts, right. So it's not that, I don't know, astounding to me that like the cuts would not be that deep. So unless we're talking like very superficial, it's like I think that's kind of almost meaningless. But yeah, go on.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean, she still remains paralyzed after the fact, which is crazy, because basically she lures her husband out of the house, which is strange with this, mission that he has to go pick up medication for one of the children. I believe one of the kids were having this problem with like a stomach issue, a stomach ache of some kind, and this was what she had claimed, as well as she had called for takeout, like for her husband to pick up food on the way home. And and this was all, she had basically requested this personally, according to the official narrative. And so essentially you have, she tells her husband that she slept really well, that she actually slept pretty well. She's feeling great, that she had, and that basically she was only really worried about their daughter Cora and the stomach ache that she had apparently been going through. And she was under the impression that this was due to some sort of liver problem that their daughter was unfortunately experiencing. And so she had a pediatrician appointment that she had scheduled for her. And this is apparently early in the morning, right? Or earlier in the day, because during the afternoon, she even like builds a snowman and like playing in the snow with the kids and I guess engaging in art projects and things of that nature. Like it's a normal day. And she's even like communicating with her husband and things of that nature. And basically he was working from home, if from everything I can gather, which again in itself is just kind of amazing that she would have to get him to leave the house in order to even engage in this sort of criminal action. But so this is by late in the day, like it's after 5, right? And she orders the takeout, and then basically her husband leaves to go pick up the medication for the young girl Cora in regard to the stomach ache. And this is all happening still just before 6. He stops at the drugstore, and basically you have surveillance video as well that essentially shows him making a call right? And this call was allegedly to her, Lindsay, his wife, in regard to Cora's medication. So he was aware of the right medication to purchase, is basically what the concept was. And that is what allegedly, transpired according to the court testimony. Now, what's interesting is that Lindsay didn't answer right away when he first called, right? She didn't answer right away. She called back like a couple of minutes later, not very long at all, but still she didn't answer right away. And then Patrick basically said, the husband said that the entire conversation, he felt like she was preoccupied, right? And as if she was doing something else and she wasn't at all concerned. Yeah. Look, dude, I honestly, this case, I don't really care about it either. It's just kind of like fell into my lap because of the overwhelming emotional reaction to it. Now, I'm not saying I don't care about the outcome of the tragedy that occurred. I care about much more the inevitable result of the pharmaceutical agents being imposed upon the weak minds of the vast majority of people who I think are unequipped to engage in life just in general, but let alone I think engage in life medicated like this to such an extraordinary level. This will only inevitably lead to inhuman action, which you wouldn't normally be capable of. This is how I believe. I think that's what these pharmaceutical agents are basically. They're primers that create these strange. Look, I believe we wouldn't necessarily be capable of engaging in some of the action that we potentially have in the past. I'm speaking for myself, just based on drug use and things of that nature that overwhelmingly impact your psychological state of mind and your ability to, yes, as I've said, impulse control and engage in that, but also just to kind of make the logical, rational, reasonable decision in the moment. Like, those things are kind of outside of it's basically out of your hands at a certain point if you've over medicated with certain drugs. And I think if you've had that experience, you realize how kind of outside of our grasp so much of even our own control, just our own actions can potentially become at a certain point based on certain factors involved.
You can put certain things in motion that you can't undo. So
absolutely,
yep,
it can change your life forever, and it can, and in one fell swoop, you can legitimately let's just say you can destroy the potential that you once had in this what feels like a very kind of a temporary experience that we should all very much cherish. And I think that anyway, just to like finish the final point so we can go to intermission, because I did think there's really just one final point in terms of kind of outlining the conclusion of this case as far as we're aware of in the moment now, is basically, I was kind of outlining the murders right themselves, and and so she really took the opportunity, after kind of providing her husband with a reason to leave. She took that opportunity, right, to strangle all three of her children with these exercise bands, and I believe had taken them to the basement. And then she goes through the process of attempting suicide by cutting her wrists and neck, and then jumping from the second-story window. Now, she sustained spinal cord injuries from the fall, and was hospitalized with significant injuries, and as we said, still remains paralyzed. But the point is that she made this claim on the record that she heard this male voice that was directing her to commit the acts. And she claims she woke up with suicidal thoughts, even though she had allegedly told her husband, according to him, of course, in his testimony in court, that she was feeling great. She was feeling good. And basically, it's the exact opposite statement that she then later on makes. And so she basically claims she had suicidal thoughts in the moment. And she basically beginning in the afternoon, she began to hear a voice which told her to harm her children. Now, this is after her husband's picked up the food. She says the voice becomes overwhelmingly loud, right? She said it becomes louder, demanding and repeatedly telling her, "This is your last chance. You have to kill the kids so you can kill yourself." That's what she said. "This is your last chance. You have to kill the kids so you can kill yourself." Clancy claimed that a force took over her and that she, quote, felt an overwhelming, irresistible compulsion to comply. Now, I've never heard a better example of the voice of God technology being described, in my opinion. If you remember the DARPA project episode that I covered, like, it's fascinating what they're capable of. You know what I mean? And it really does seem like, this is something that, and even with that woman who was an investigative reporter and a journalist reporting on the Zorro Ranch case for Epstein, right, who claims that she was targeted by a directed energy weapon, and that essentially what she described was a van being basically headquartered outside of her residence on the street somewhere, and they were targeting her with EMF frequencies and things of that nature, which would deliberately cause her to have a psychotic break. And now, it's like we've heard these stories too often. And I'm not at all saying that this is what this woman experienced. Now, to me, I very much think this is a result of the pharmaceutical agents and the overprescriptions that she had unfortunately been given by the psychiatrists that I think are given far too much respect than they deserve. And should be, medical malpractice leads to legitimate consequences, man. And I think overprescribing people with these psychotropic drugs that will have an overwhelming effect on just your ability to engage in life, let alone your emotional state of mind. It's like, look, life doesn't come with a Band-Aid. You have to grow up at some point, especially if you want to have children. You want to be responsible for the lives of young children that will ultimately become adults and reflect upon you in society at large. It's like, obviously they didn't want to have children, but still, who am I to say? Psychotic breaks can happen in a very quick, extraordinary matter of time that is almost incomprehensible. So it's a possibility. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of just a fascinating outcome. And when you see like the TikTok conspiracy, right? Because basically just after the death, you see the husband, he makes this public statement where he expresses nothing but support for his wife at the time, Lindsay. And he urges the public at this time, just after the murder of his children, to forgive his wife, right? And so it's like, I don't know, man. Like, in the heat of the moment, that is very strange to do, and who knows? And now you have many people jumping on one side, which is the postpartum mental health, depression aspect and anxiety of it all, right? And that basically being the priority for many people, which is strange. And then others, as we mentioned in the first place, basically kind of utilizing it and weaponizing it in the framework of like the pro-abortion mantra of essentially it's a mother's choice. And it's just absurd, honestly, for people to even imagine making that argument, let alone, ride or die, man. Yeah, for sure. I mean, if your wife just murdered all 3 of your young infant children, and let's pull up one picture of these children just so everyone's aware, and maybe it will at the very least hit home a little bit deeper in terms of the young children who were unfortunately, murdered in this case. And this is Cora Dawson and Callan, I guess, is the other name, but obviously, no innocent young child, deserves this to be the case, right? And I think that's important for everyone to honestly consider, as far as, you know, the 3 children being strangled by their own mother because she's overprescribed pharmaceutical agents and effectively has a psychotic breakdown. And I think this happens to many more people who just self-harm, like that person in the chat claimed earlier. And yeah, it's tragic, man. And it doesn't, look, man, I'm in no way saying not to, I think you should question everything. But to not realize that information is being misrepresented and weaponized for this sort of cultural escalation in terms of the culture war, right? I think that's always happening, and it's something that we just have to be aware of, that, you know, to protect ourselves and defend our subconscious minds from falling into preordained outcomes or pre-laden traps that will effectively get you to consider these nonsensical, you know, concepts that really, again, are a misrepresentation of the facts and the reality of what is truly the underlying root cause. So TikTok conspiracy theories reign supreme, and basically it's all, we should just believe all women. You know, that's
100%. Good way to take us off to intermission. We'll be back here in a few. We still got those phone lines open. We have plenty more to talk to you guys about here in a few. We'll be back in a little bit. Jacob, go ahead and roll that beautiful bean footage.
So you've decided to take up ruling the world. Congratulations. Now, before you get started, it's important to learn about false flags. They are an essential component in controlling popular opinion. False flags will help to keep everyone too afraid to ask questions. The only thing they will be asking for is for more government to keep them safe. False flags are also great in getting support for unpopular, unjust wars. Now let's get started. Step 1. Create a vague enemy like terrorists. If the public does not seem content with a vague title like this, consider something more specific like ISIS. If that accidentally sheds light on who your allies really are, don't worry. Most people don't read or research, and if they do, you can simply call them nutbags. Step 2. Use many different ways to refer to the enemy. For example, change ISIS to ISIL to IS to Muslim extremists to Muslim jihadists. You get the idea. Confusion is a key ingredient to every efficient false flag, so it's best to prepare those minds in advance. Step 3. Pick a location. Choose a city that has new legislation already written up and ready to go. After the false flag, you and your world-ruling friends can swoop in and save the day with new oppressive laws. The public will feel safe and everyone wins. Step 4. Fake shootings are a simple go-to source of fear and mind control. Set up a patsy with anticipation so that you can later refer to his troubled past. Step 5. Prepare for your false flag with drills. With a few small changes, the day of your planned event you can present your drill as real. If anyone finds out about the drills beforehand, don't worry. The public believes in coincidences and will be amazed but not suspicious. Step 6. For propaganda purposes, it is best to name your event with something that has a nice ring. 9/11 is a good example. It will be sealed in the minds of the masses forever. Try words that start with the same letter as your chosen city, like Boston bombing or Sydney siege. Also try catchy names like Jihadi John and Jihadi Jake. Step 7. It is best to kill, or pretend to kill the patsy when your event is finished. This will ensure that nobody will try to reach them for more information on what really happened. Step 8. Get some actors. Everybody loves a good story with heroes, neighbors, love affairs, good Samaritans. Get creative. It is best if they have prior acting experience and ties to the government. This will make them good liars and motivated to keep your secret. Step 9. If your time or budget does not allow for a live setting, simply create an event in a studio or remote location. Film and carefully edit with special effects, and then pass off as raw footage. Nobody will question this. Step 10. Use and monitor social media. Get feel-good hashtags like #NotAfraid, #JeSuiCharlie. You can later flash these around at your pre-planned peace march. By following this easy 10-step process, you are on your way to creating your very own false flag for public mind control. It's easy and anyone can do it, provided you have unlimited funds, a dumbed-down population and a pool of sellouts who will be willing players in your scheme. Creating a false flag will be an essential part of your complete world domination. Remember, fear is your friend.
Welcome back. That's a new one. We got a new unique one this week. Good job, Jacob. We're going to bring up one of the patrons here in a few. Probably going to cut this a little bit on the short side today. Austin's got a little bit of a headache, and I want to go to bed. Although I think, just teasing it out here, you guys in the chat, let us know if you don't like this idea, but kicking around the idea of maybe starting like a half hour earlier. You tell us. I don't know. But just throwing out there, phone lines are still open, 1-833-722-DEAD, 1-833-722-3323. Give us a call. Last week, we had quite the butthole puckering call, kind of alluding to perhaps a diesel shortage, if I'm recalling correctly. Apparently, we're dealing with some sort of what do we call this? Not a shortage, but an outage in Indiana. You've got lots of thoughts on that, Austin, and then we'll go into talking to some of the patrons, some of the wonderful people who chip in a few dineros for us over here. But yeah, kind of wild. I mean, we just, like I said, we said that butthole puckering call, kind of alluding to looking for another resource getting ready to go down the drain. Which it seems more and more they're trying to get us comfortable with this unfortunate creeping kind of possibility. I mean, we had not too long ago, a few years ago, we had that Barack Obama film that he assisted and created, to Leave the World Behind, that had Julia Roberts and I think Ethan Hawke and some other people in it. It was kind of the idea of what if just everything just shut down all at once. I mean, I think I keep seeing these ads about some fucking movie where there's literally some weird supernatural force keeping it so people can't open their doors and they're all trapped in their houses. But we're just getting different versions of the same sort of thing. Some sort of resource of sorts that we use in our day-to-day is in some way getting fucked. Whether that's, gas, or, electricity. Hell, even there's other variants that get more fun, like concepts of things like AI demons and stuff like that. Even that's kind of same variation. They're likely going to end up, messing with some sort of resource or some sort, or shutting down this power grid or that power grid. So just, I don't know, a little bit of a dystopic future we're kind of walking into a little bit here. And looks like some people have been noticing some of these patterns with these outages, you particularly.
Well, I will say that apparently the Gary, Indiana power outage should be viewed through the lens of racism. And it
really, all things should, Austin?
Yeah,
okay.
My bad. See, that's my problem, is that I don't pick the low-hanging fruit and run with it. And I think that is what the issue for me always seems to, at the very least, it kind of comes back to the fact that the vast majority of people are very much primed and ready for this kind of over emotional reactionary state of mind, in terms of never anticipating the next move of the permanent establishment, how they will utilize this propaganda for their own benefit. I think those things matter. And I think they matter more than anything else, because that's where the deception lies. And so for me personally, I think anytime you witness, and this is how I view, like, I'm not at all denying racial stereotypes in terms of they exist for a reason, unfortunately. And I will say that clearly you can point to, just let's just say the worst examples of any given culture, right? And provide that as, and basically prop that up as if it should be, the ultimate example, when in reality is once again a misrepresentation of things. And so I've lived in let's just say a very economically distraught areas in my life, just in terms of even making the transition to the state economy of California. Like we had to live in the high desert, in areas that you would never want to live in your life, honestly. And that's how I personally feel. If you're born and raised there, you love it. Far be it for me to make that judgment on your behalf. But still, I will say that I've been the minority in my own community as well, right? And I think that's interesting. It gave me perspective I never expected to have, right? And so I understand the cultural dynamic at play in certain areas in the domestic U.S. And it's something that we should all understand. But I also think that they provide the low-hanging fruit for people to, unfortunately, as I said, sort of digest it, and then never properly compartmentalize the information and understand that this is effectively really a way in which you can, I believe, undermine your own warped view. It basically helps provide you with the ability to undermine your own perspective on life. And so it creates this warped version of reality. And I think that's all by design. And so whenever you see these issues that are kind of, provided in this false framework, and again, the Indiana power outage being one of them, and in my opinion, the main crux of the races, just in terms of racism even being involved, the only real involvement is for it to be used as leverage to escalate the culture war, right? Simultaneously, while you still have this kind of like playing out on both sides, where you have the right-wing version of the racism in terms of the warped perspective, and the left-wing version of the racial dynamic and the sort of escalating culture war in this specific brand of with the clear and obvious racial tension involved and applied. What's up, Jacob?
We got a caller, I believe.
Yeah,
Jacob says go ahead.
Yeah, we do have a caller. We have Nicole on the line calling in. Has a weird theory about the Lindsay Clancy situation. So go ahead, caller.
All right.
I love that you're calling me caller. Okay. Hi, it's Nicole. How are you?
Hey.
All right. So the whole Lindsay Clancy, this is kind of far out there, but I can't help but feel, I keep coming back to Helena Blavatsky's book, ISIS Unveiled, and how she talked about kind of the resurgence of the worship of the dark feminine archetype being one of the indicators that the golden age / Babylon Rising was underway, or the new Babylon Rising. And I guess my point being the dark feminine archetype is being heavily pushed. I mean, we saw even like this resurgence of Casey Anthony being put all over social media for a while, convincing women that there are acceptable reasons for killing their offspring. We saw local legislation passed for like full-term abortion, and or convincing like half the population to defend a woman who killed her children. And although I feel like there is definitely, like, I'm kind of torn on this one, because one side of me completely understands the whole concept of the pharmaceuticals. I know firsthand with friends and family how much that can impact someone's sanity. But also, I feel like when you follow what the historical occultists have kind of theorized and the theosophists have kind of, I guess, painted out as part of what they plan to kind of roll out, or things to look for the adepts, for those in the know, of signs that the whole Babylon Rising, I guess 2.0 or whatever you want to call it, is underway. There's definitely been heavy emphasis on just the worship of the dark feminine. And I personally have seen a major upsurge in this, even just from almost every account that pops up on my feed, having something to do with, you know, separating men and women embracing their power. I mean, it's even past the neo-feminist stuff at this point. People are literally celebrating killing their children. Half of the population, I mean, everyone's fighting about the Clancy case right now. You have men who are rational and logical, kind of following the case and giving their input, and then women, of course, emotionally are going to attach to all the other aspects of it. So you just have men and women in the comment section fighting incessantly, and then I don't know.
I have to tell you, just to reinforce what you're saying. Nick, well, hold on.
Delay, Austin. Don't forget to delay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk on you. I just wanted to tell you this one part, because as far as like the kind of pitting against each other, right? The gender dynamic at play here, especially in regard to this case directly, is I saw there was basically a viral. Essentially, there was a viral post of like this female that had a dating litmus test, right, that she had provided, and it was in regard to how all of these women should follow suit, and essentially they should also implement this women's litmus test for dating men, right, in terms of in regard to it hinging specifically on the man's perspective of the Lindsay Clancy case. And so basically she was saying in the viral video that essentially she couldn't have a relationship, right, with a man who would effectively believe that that Clancy deserves jail time, right? And this is now become the viral video vetting question for this woman, who outlined her perspective of the fact that Lindsay Clancy should be essentially freed and in no way held accountable for her actions. And so I do find that very interesting in the perspective of how you could kind of leverage the influencers in terms of the influencer industrial complex, and these kind of, not even to say that this specific viral video and the influencer behind it is let's say paid for by the permanent establishment to a certain extent. Who knows? I would think that definitely applies, but I'm not sure. I just felt like that reinforces exactly what you're saying as far as in the comments with the overt level of kind of conflict, right, playing out in the chat, right, in terms of the gender dynamic. But anyway, sorry for talking over you.
Back to you, caller, just to put you back on track. Make sure I'm getting what you're putting down. Are you implying that you think there's some sort of occult working of sorts occurring here, perhaps? Maybe whether it's intentional or not?
I mean, this is where my brain always goes. I always feel that there is some occult or esoterical, I always assume it's either a psyop or a ritual. And and also, a divisive tactic at the same time. And so with this particular case, I think just because I've had this awareness the last couple years as to just this like uptick, even on like my Instagram feed, it's like all this dark feminine, all these women are, doing all of these, not just new age practices, which we've seen for a long time, which is, I've said forever, the new age of Luciferianism rebranded. It's just rebranded with, but it's this whole dark feminine. And that particular phrase was used in Blavatsky's book. And it's also just been really pushed through the social medias. And so in my mind, anytime I see something really pushed like heavily virally, and so much emotion behind it, and it's so divisive, yes, it's also like the divide and conquer, which, they've already divided us with race, with gender ideology, with religion, with politics. And now I feel like they're going for, the sex, to separate people through the sexes as well. But there's always in my mind some occult or esoteric, like some purpose in regard. And I think that's where, and maybe that's kind of like a doomed way to look at things, but I feel like there's just this realm that overlaps ours where there's so much more going on. And so I just have felt that this being pushed so heavily and everyone talking about it, and then so many women, getting behind this woman, which I empathize with her position 100%, but also that's part of the psyop in a way, whether it be like a spiritual psyop or an actual psyop or both. I feel like anything that is going to get an emotional response from someone or really pull them in is going to have some type of energetic, esoteric, occult purpose as well. And I just feel like this kind of follows suit, this particular case. And in as much as it kind of, like the whole Casey Anthony, like I said, all of a sudden being brought back on, who clearly killed her child, the abortion laws being passed, this, and then you have women just cheering for the killing of their, 9-month-old aborted child and just jumping up and down. And then women online just who've never met this person, but because there's this strong psychological and emotional attachment that women feel, they're fighting. It's all, I don't know. It just seems
it inherently flips the script
there, right? And
it just inherently
I just can't help but.
As far as the inverted moral landscape, right? Like that's what I see, right? So could imagine a world where you convince mothers that it is their right to kill their own child, right? Like, and then beyond that, it's not only their right, it's almost become inherently a sort of like moral ground to stand on, as if it's your way to flex, what a woman has become, and this sort of like what is the concept in terms of like I'm forgetting the terminology that's proper in the moment, but the point being is that obviously they have the empowerment, the female empowerment aspect of this concept, right, is obviously being misrepresented and attached in this sort of sinister way, where I think it only provides that primer to effectively allow these young women, not even young women, but just women who are unfortunately in that mindset and have yet to kind of like um, detach from the deception, which is clearly being branded specifically for them, right? This is what we all need to realize, is that we have our own brands of propaganda that are out there waiting for us, that are specifically generated for our mindset, for our mentality, for our psychological and political frame of mind philosophy. They kind of bank on essentially utilizing that and then effectively leveraging it against us. And so I think that that is obviously very much a part of this narrative as well, in terms of any of these narratives that escalate the culture war through the gender dynamic and this sort of gender paradigm, as far as the duality and pitting them against each other. And so, yeah, I couldn't agree more, as far as a hidden hand of occult, esoteric, kind of new age philosophy behind it as well, because the entire goal is to ultimately invert society, morally speaking, to where this is the world we live in. We live in a world where mothers believe it is their right to engage and practice their female empowerment, to commit murder in terms of their own children, which is legitimately, I mean, at the very least, as if it's morally justified, and that there's ground to stand on in terms of that debate. That feels like they're achieving their goal just in terms of us engaging in that debate in the first place, because it shows how far gone society and our cultural values have become. And so, yeah, I do agree with that. Honestly, I love that. I appreciate that as well.
With that caller, we're gonna probably bring on one of the patrons here. But you can, whatever, I mean, if you want to kind of bring it to a close, if you have any final thoughts on all this, I generally kind of agree with you. There definitely is something. It's pretty common. I know O9A literature is rife with mentions of the dark feminine. It's pretty common in occult linguistics. I mean, hell, you look in the Kabbalah; they're always obsessed with the dimorphism between masculine and feminine, and the interplay between all of that. So totally checks out. But any final thoughts, kind of bringing this to an end, or something you wanted to get in there? Because I generally, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if there is some occult working at play here, or if it's just a naturally occurring sort of thing. It's kind of hard to tell, but I wouldn't be surprised either way. Either way, people are feeding off of this energy, whether it's intentional or not. But any final thoughts to kind of bring this to a little bit of a period point?
Yes, Jose, I love your kitten. Glizzy is adorable. I am in love with your kitten. And thank you for letting me call in. This is my first time, so I was super nervous. And Austin knows I don't talk on the telephone, so this is a step. Baby step. Okay. Love you guys. Bye.
Love you too. Definitely call back in. The chat loved you. All right, let's get Ass Cream in here. A little bit of a rough name. Bring him in to finish off the show. I think bringing it back to the mental health place, kind of finishing off the show on that note. Hey, Ass Cream, how you doing? Pleasure to have you back here. You were on the show last week. I'll actually be going on your show, I think, next week. I know it's on the calendar. I forget what day.
One last thing before we start off. Just to fully... Because honestly, the divine feminine aspect, I talked about it recently whenever we discussed Under the Silver Lake. And my God, I feel like that it couldn't apply more in terms of the cultural disillusionment, right? And feeling as if there are these cultural touchstones that have been co-opted, right? And beyond that, you have what seems to have been, and this is what I think is interesting, is that in order to sort of like maintain control within the concept, the ultimately you have the divine feminine and celebrity culture in general acting as a spiritual trap, luring men into, and I don't think this only applies to men, but I do think there's something to it, but as a spiritual trap to essentially lure men into a cycle of consumption, overconsumption, and helplessness, while basically the elite achieve this sort of pseudo-scientific or pseudo-religious transcendence. And so I think there's nothing more applicable than this kind of the false rebellion construct of providing this false cultural touchstone for society to effectively embrace that will only inevitably corrupt the moral standing and moral ground that, let's just say, the moral foundation this society is to stand upon. It will only effectively just be entirely undermined and probably disintegrate under your own feet, unbeknownst to you, because you've embraced those inverted principles. So I think that is the ultimate spiritual trap, right? And that's what we're effectively realizing in the current moment, is that, clearly they're attempting to lure us into these false frameworks of these false concepts, and then consistently utilize this to their own advantage. And I think it leaves us in this kind of like, again, we need to consistently anticipate the next move, right? Instead of always be in this overreactive state of mind. It's just, I think that provides them with an inherent advantage. And obviously, I think that comes with the territory in a way when you are the permanent establishment. So it's up to us to kind of, at the very least, provide ourselves with a defense mechanism for that in general. But I thought that was a great point, and I appreciate tying it back to the divine feminine, because I do believe that we have nothing but like this cryptic subliminal corruption playing out before our eyes that most people can't even identify and acknowledge. So anyway.
No, you're dead on. Ass cream. Let's talk a little bit about, I believe you have an anecdotal example of people losing their fucking mind. Speaking to our current mental crisis. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Well, actually, I didn't expect to call in today, just because, but the topic was so relevant to something that I experienced recently. First, real quickly, Jose, we know you're just making your cat business for money laundering.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened was I recently had a childhood friend that I've known since first grade who visited me a couple of weeks ago here in Florida. And I've known this guy since the first grade. We became friends before I was able even to speak English, because I was really good at drawing dinosaurs. He loved dinosaurs. Friendships are made. And he's currently a philosophy professor at a certain university, which I won't mention names. But when he came to visit me, and I haven't seen him in 15 years, I noticed that he had some severe, something was off his rocker. And I'm talking about, like, anytime we'd be sitting, like, at the breakfast nook, he's like rocking his head back and forth, and just like, making weird comments. He was a habitual door unlocker, meaning that he couldn't close the refrigerator for the love of God. He couldn't close the front door for the love of God. He clogged my toilet 2 times in the fucking 5 days. So we were at the St. Petersburg Pier in Florida, and at the end of the pier, there is this 3-story tower, and each story has a different restaurant on it. And we had the best seats in the house at the top of the tower, and we were sitting there. And 15 minutes into the service, he's like, "Ice cream, I have a feeling this window is going to fall out, and I'm going to fall out with the window." And I'm like, "Dude, that's not happening." He's like, No, I have a hunch that this window is just going to fall out any minute, and I'm just going to fall out, and I can't swim, and I'm going to drown to death. And I had to stop him. I had to say no. And I'm like, "Listen, man, like, I understand, like, from clearly my experience with you in the first few days, that you have some mental health issues, but I'm not going to cater to irrational mental health issues. And maybe because I've known this guy since, since the first grade, I was being a little bit harsh, but at the same time, maybe I should have been a little bit more benevolent." And I'm still kind of analyzing the situation as to how I should handle, the matter. But I refuse to move the tables because we have the prime seats. And I know I just need some guidance here as to if I did it right or wrong.
Well, it'd be hard for me to say personally without knowing the individual, but I that would be generally my perspective. Like, I don't think you should antagonize or be going out of your way to make things worse. But I also do think you probably, like you said, you shouldn't be catering to his delusions if there are any. And I don't know, just try to be as accommodating as possible and not care delusions. And then, I don't know, in all honesty, I guess I would just take stock if this is someone you want to make a regular in your life. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's someone who's, you've just kind of rekindled. So it's not like someone who's really all that necessary to begin with, is I guess would be my perspective. But I don't know. What about you, Austin?
I mean, honestly, he's a long time friend. You know, I understand that. I think it's if you did just recently rekindle, then yeah, it's a little different. But at the same time, it's
We've
like
always kept in touch. We've kept in touch for
yeah,
long
see,
time.
That changes things a little bit, yeah.
then, yeah, and I will say, man, like I have some friends that really I appreciate them because they don't even go there with me because they know better not to, right? It's sort of that sensibility involved in the friendship, and it's not that because I'll go out of my way just to, and I don't take the conversation, I don't force the conversation on people. Like that's just not who I am. Like I want to have a good relationship and a good interaction with the person. Now that doesn't mean I'm a different person when I'm around them either, right? And so that there's something about like, are they personally worth enough to me, right? Just as far as their relationship and friendship, that I want to make the extra effort and take the extra effort in terms of what it takes to really have that friendship. But even then, it's like you shouldn't be put in that position necessarily if you really were as close as you should be, you know. And again, I'm not at all criticizing the person. I just think that, you know, sometimes you evolve past others that you've known in the past, and that doesn't mean I think most often that has to do with self-inflicted wounds, with inability to grow, with and things of that nature, which only really just keep people in this pattern, this holding pattern where they can't quite break out of it, and it's only self-defeating, and it also only negatively impacts everyone around them and their own family as well. And it's like, I hope that's not the case because I see that happening so very often. And then also people just subconsciously embracing bad ideas because they have good intentions, but they're very vulnerable and novice in terms of their understanding of the political paradigm. You can't bridge that gap for them as well. It's like something I've had to personally contend with. Like, it's definitely a point of frustration because, you know, you want to maintain close friendships and close relationships that mean something to you. But also if the other person is not participating and, you know, in terms of their willingness to evolve and become better and grow as a person and meet you, you know, kind of, yeah, I just think that sometimes you unfortunately have to come to terms with the fact that a relationship has run its course. And that's a terrible thing to have to accept. And hopefully you can have that conversation directly with them and they'll prove you wrong. And, you know, and they'll surprise you with the willingness to participate in that friendship. And so, you know, I think again, it takes you should, when you're doing all the heavy liftings in a social relationship with a person, I think you should just learn that lesson and move on. You know, it's like almost something that I'm realizing as well personally. Like I've had to realize over years and years of just like I've had to make decisions in the past where I basically shut a chapter in my life entirely, you know, and tried to turn the page because I felt as if I surrounded myself with people who weren't quite, you know, necessarily
What happened?
in my best interest. First of all, Jose, I'll be right back. I think he had to take a call, but basically it's just kind of strange, you know, because anyway, I just think if you're being required, now I'm alone. Okay. So if you're being required to essentially do too much of the heavy lifting in terms of, you know, a relationship with a person, then again, I think it's important for you to come to terms with that fact and realize, unfortunately, you might care more about the friendship or the relationship or the person than maybe they even do about you. And whenever you become willing to at least admit that fact, then yeah, you can sort of put it where it should be in a compartmentalized place in your mind and move on and continue to surround yourself with people who will only kind of benefit you and not in a selfish way, but in a way in which we can, as I've said many times recently, just effectively grow together. And so that's kind of what my overall philosophy and conclusion was there with Ass Cream. Again, I'm not sure what the details are with his friend.
Yeah.
But
yeah, definitely don't take our advice too strongly. It sounds like we're saying fuck this guy. I don't know enough details to really give you too many. I mean, I would add something to it, to this. I know it sounds callous saying that, but I also on the same breath, I think like, things, people, things, jobs, life comes in seasons, so I mean, it doesn't mean he may have been something to you at one point in time, and I mean, sometimes you may just be pushing too hard to make it work. So I don't know. Right. But with that, like I think we're kind of at a good end here. We brought it to a nice, kind of came full circle back to the mental health. Another week in the books. Get ready to go hang out with the patrons in the post show. And yeah, maybe we'll kick it back a half hour. So I saw a couple people in the chat saying they liked the idea. Nobody's saying they didn't. So hey, maybe we'll kick it back a half hour. Now the school year is started again. Everyone, back in the normal ring of the the run of things. Knock it back a little bit, at least for me. I want to go to bed earlier. But Austin, me and you, we're doing was not tomorrow. I keep mixing up things tomorrow, but Thursday.
Yep.
We're finally. I think we rescheduled. I think we only did once. We only rescheduled once. Yeah. The Wicker Man will be the 1971 Christopher Lee film. The Wicker Man, although he was like technically not. People say Christopher Lee. He was like the co-star. Right. He wasn't the lead, but either way, good story, a good movie for us to dig into. I think we may try to make this a regular thing. I mean, I've noticed, recently, as we've done the show, every so often. Today, actually, doing the show, we were going to talk about a movie, The Boys from Brazil, I believe.
Oh, dude,
which that'll have to be another episode for us to do one of these days. Another, kind of digging into occult film analysis. But yeah, I mean, I think we're going to make this a regular thing probably going forward, maybe even ping pong back and forth with suggestions from each other, kind of a cult analysis of different films. So I'm looking forward to it. I may get him to watch some anime movies. So it'll be fun. Looking forward to it. But with that, Austin, where can people find you at in the meantime till we come back next week?
Sounds good, buddy. Yeah, you guys already know you can find me at the Underclass Podcast. Definitely. I saw somebody in the chat just say Boys from Brazil, and I just wanted to say that's also it's a great movie from 1978 with Gregory Peck and Laurence Olivier, but it's also a really good book, and the author glows like the sun. It's very strange, but we'll have to talk about that at a certain point. And very interesting take on this sort of eugenics, Nazi eugenics, transhumanist policies that really made me reflect much more on Colonia Dignidad and think a little bit differently in terms of what else could have been happening there in the remote jungles of Chile, right? It's just fascinating stuff. But anyway, yeah, nothing but love from me. You guys know this. Sorry if I was a little bit off. I had a crazy headache I was dealing with all day. And honestly, I was trying to just work through the terminology and present information without feeling like a psychotic person. So it was a little bit of an out-of-body experience, but it happens pretty often. Anyway, I love you guys. And just dropped episode 67 of whatever this is on the Patreon. So go check that out as well. It was a lot of fun. And at some point, I will have to tell my helter-skelter narrative in terms of the pushback of the Gary, Indiana power outage, because it is fascinating and there's a lot to do with it. But I do think it has to do more with data centers, with Operation Urban Shield style sort of precedent-setting operations in order to kind of stage what seemed to be domestic power outages. Because if you think about Operation Cyber Polygon we mentioned last week, it's something that is in the fold in terms of the dystopian framework. And so again, I wouldn't be surprised if we have, and I mentioned Operation Urban Shield because that clearly was a sort of an example of a test operation to essentially stage a massive, let's just say, to place a major metropolitan area under martial law as a massive test run to effectively gauge exactly how the population would respond. And I believe this could potentially also be playing out in terms of this power outage in Indiana as well. And so I think you can never put it past the permanent establishment and the intelligence apparatus in terms of what they're willing to effectively, consider in terms of giving the green light in this sort of precedent-setting operation. So anyway, nothing but love. I appreciate you all. And I'll catch you guys next week. I have a few things coming up as well, so keep your eyes peeled.
By the way, no morning dump tomorrow morning. I'm doing a paywalled episode at the normal time that I would be doing it. I have Sven Savaros, sorry if I fucked up your name, an OKC researcher who's dug quite extensively into Carol Howe, so we'll be digging into that, and a little bit into Andreas Strassmeyer, so that'll be a fun dig. Also on those episodes with Austin, like I told you, they're gonna be a regular thing, and I haven't come up with a fun little branding name yet. And I think whenever we launch Already Dead as its separate channel, RSS feed, yada yada, I think that will be one of the contents that sticks with it. Ends up staying on the Already Dead side of things. So we gotta have a catchy little brand name. So think of some sort of our occult film analysis. Something, make it stick, make it pop. So that's my homework for you guys. Give me something in the comments for next week, or for you have till Thursday actually, so you're pretty limited. But with that, if you guys want to support what I'm doing, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave 5-star review on iTunes, Spotify, all the audio podcatchers, Twitter as well. On Twitter, it's at Tower Gang Jose. Everywhere else, it's the No Way Jose podcast. If you want to support the show the best way you can do it with money over at patreon.com/No Way Jose 2020. The lowest level is $2. It gives you access to early episodes. I do about 1 to 2 of those per week. Like that episode I just told you about that I'm doing tomorrow at 11 a.m. You got to chip in $2 if you're going to show up to that sucker. I usually keep about 3 to 4 behind the paywall at any given time. Give you guys access to ad-free RSS feed, the Telegram, the pre-show, the post-show, and the video call, and me and Austin's weekly live call-in show. This show right here, Already Dead, which is on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Maybe 9, we'll see. Also give a big shout out to the highest level of my Patreon. It's a big thank you for their support. My previous host and Tower Gang, at Learn Toad. Also at Brigade D's, at ZWCK, at _Ims at Zeal, Tim Tell, at John Glebo, big fan of the show, Torme, at Wayne Tykus, 100 Car for Kids, No Free Lunch, Jack, Mark Vestibule, Jacob Wintergrad of the Biblical Anarchy Podcast, and John Black, you beautiful bastard. I can see your beautiful face on the screen right now over there in the private chat for the patrons. We'll see you guys in the next one. Love you all.